My therapist was mocking me with my ex. They had a private chat, and I was the main attraction. I found out by accident screenshots that landed in my hands through a coworker. They laughed about my fears, my tears, my secrets. What I confessed in a supposed safe space had become the punchline of their private circus. My name is Rachel. I'm 34. I live in Seattle and work as an employment attorney. The irony? I help people escape toxic workplaces while I sat in a therapy room spilling my guts to a woman who turned my vulnerabilities into jokes for my ex. Up until that night, I believed in therapy. I believed in safe spaces. I believed in honesty. And then I saw how my most intimate admissions had been reduced to memes. And in that moment, I knew I wasn't the victim anymore. They wanted a game? They just got one. I saw them laugh at my words, at my pain. And I didn't cry. I stared at those screenshots over and over again. Nathan, my ex. And Kelly, the woman I'd been paying $150 a session to support me. They weren't just talking about me. They were mocking me. Another day, another Rachel drama. Like a reality show, but slower, Kelly wrote. I closed the screen. And then I opened a blank document. There's a special kind of feeling when pain turns into pure strategy. It's cold. It's clean. It's unstoppable. I don't lose. And I certainly don't let people like them rewrite my story. The next day, I went to my session as if nothing had happened. I sat across from her, looked her in the eye, and waited. I collected every word, every carefully measured phrase. Because they forgot one simple truth: lawyers aren't fooled by words. We listen to the things people try to hide between the lines. Kelly acted flawlessly, professional, sympathetic. But I saw the cracks. Did she already know that I knew? Or was she still playing blind? It didn't matter anymore. I decided to play the long game. Stay quiet. Gather more proof. And when I was done, this wouldn't be an emotional meltdown. It would be a lawsuit. I didn't rush to confront her. That's what they expected. That's what they always expect. For the woman to unravel, to spiral, to get emotional and messy and loud. So they can point and say, see? She's unstable. I'm not giving them that. The day after I saw the screenshots, I booked 2 more sessions with Kelly. I smiled. I thanked her for her help. I played the polite, wounded professional. The same Rachel she thought she knew. But now I was studying her. Every word. Every glance. Every hesitation. And I recorded everything. Not with a hidden camera, that would be illegal in Washington without consent, but with detailed notes. After each session, I wrote down everything verbatim. The tone, the phrasing, the subtle slips she didn't realize she made. Like when she said, sometimes people closest to us might have unconventional ways of processing conflict. With that same slight smirk I recognized from the chat. She was careful, but not careful enough. At night, I researched the ethical codes for licensed therapists in the state of Washington. I read every clause, every disciplinary precedent, every gray area. And I found what I needed. Confidentiality isn't just a courtesy. It's a pillar. And violating it, even informally, even in private circles, can cost a license. But I didn't just want to report her. I wanted her to feel the anticipation, the fear, the not knowing. So I took the long road. First, I created an anonymous inquiry to the state psychological board, asking about informal violations of client confidentiality and the likelihood of investigation if digital evidence were presented. The reply came in 2 days. And it was encouraging. Second, I started paying closer attention to Nathan's social media. His passive-aggressive posts. His stories that were suddenly filled with inside jokes eerily close to phrases I'd only ever used in therapy. I took screenshots, compiled them, dated them. And third, I hired a private investigator. Not to follow Kelly. That would be overkill. But to comb through her digital footprint. Turns out she wasn't just sloppy in chat. She had a pattern. She ran a podcast under a pseudonym, one she thought was clever enough to hide behind. The real mind behind the mask. Cute. Except in episode 22, she talked about that type of client who self-identifies as a rescuer but secretly thrives on victimhood. Her description was almost word for word what I'd shared in session 3. The timeline matched. The phrasing matched. She was using me for content. By week 3, I had a digital file 3 inches thick. Screenshots. Transcripts. Cross-reference dates and quotes. And still I didn't go to HR. I didn't confront Nathan. I waited. Because this wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about control. About taking back the narrative they thought they owned. And they had no idea the clock was ticking. At our next session, Kelly tried a new approach. She suggested we explore forgiveness. It's important to release resentment, she said smoothly. Sometimes we create narratives that trap us in cycles of blame. I almost laughed. She was baiting me, seeing if I'd flinch, if I'd cave, if I'd take the easy out and cry about closure. But closure isn't something you ask for. Something you take. So I smiled. That's a good point, I said softly. Maybe I should let go of the idea that people can't change. Her smile faltered just for a second, because she knew, but she couldn't be sure. And I wanted her to stew in that uncertainty a little longer. At home I organized everything. Built a timeline. Cross-referenced chat logs, podcast episodes, Nathan's posts, session notes. I called my friend Laura, an ethics lawyer, and asked for a hypothetical consultation. She didn't need much context before she said, Rachel, if you wanted to, you could shred her license. But I didn't just want to shred her license. I wanted to own the whole board. Laura and I outlined a phased approach. Phase 1, formal complaint to the licensing board, anonymously at first. Let them investigate in the dark. Phase 2, contact select legal journalists I trusted with the evidence. Quietly. Without emotion. As a cautionary tale, not a scandal. Phase 3, if they pushed back. File for civil damages. But Laura warned me. This won't be clean. They'll fight dirty. They'll try to reframe it as overreaction, as misinterpretation, as hurt feelings. You need to stay ahead of the story. I nodded. I'd spent years letting people narrate my life. That era was over. I submitted the complaint the next day. 2 days later, Kelly canceled our session. Unexpected schedule conflict, her email said. Sure. And 3 days after that, Nathan posted a vague story about some people weaponizing their victim narratives. I smiled. They were feeling it. Good. 'Cause I was just getting started. The story broke on a Thursday. I didn't push for it. I'd sent the evidence to a journalist I trusted, Rebecca Lynn, known for exposing malpractice in the wellness and mental health industries. I didn't sign my name. I didn't ask for recognition. I just sent the files, the timeline, the documentation. And Rebecca did what she does best. The headline was sharp. Clinical. When your therapist breaks the room. Confidentiality breaches in the era of private chats. No names. Not yet. But the article painted the picture perfectly. A therapist using private details from sessions in group chats and podcasts, violating ethics codes, and breaching the sacred boundary of client trust. The internet doesn't need names to burn someone. By noon, the psychology subreddit was exploding. By evening, TikTok therapists were stitching videos dissecting the case, guessing who it might be. And inside our local circles, the whispers started. Kelly posted a cryptic Instagram story. Reminder. Narratives can be manipulated. Stay grounded. Nathan posted a passive-aggressive meme about bitter exes who can't let go. They were scrambling. But they didn't understand yet. I wasn't reacting. I was executing. The licensing board sent me a formal notice that an investigation had been opened. I could have smiled, but I didn't. I wasn't celebrating yet. Because they'd fight dirty. That's what people like Kelly and Nathan do when they lose the upper hand. They try to spin the story. Discredit the source. And sure enough, by Friday, Nathan had started planting the seeds. He texted 2 of my old college friends, hinting that I was going through a fragile time. He posted a thread on Twitter about how weaponizing therapy can be dangerous for both clients and practitioners. Classic. Reframe the abuser as the victim. I didn't reply. I didn't post. Instead, I sent a second file to Rebecca. This time it included Kelly's podcast transcript, highlighted sections, dates cross-referenced with my therapy sessions. I attached Nathan's social media posts. The pattern was undeniable. Rebecca's second piece went live on Monday. This one wasn't anonymous. It named Kelly. It named the podcast. It included screenshots, carefully redacted, but clear enough to prove intent. It ended with an update from the licensing board. Kelly's license had been suspended pending a formal review. Nathan stayed silent after that. Kelly deleted the podcast within hours of the article dropping. Her LinkedIn went private. Her website disappeared. But I didn't stop watching. Because even with the public on my side, I knew their type. They wouldn't apologize. They wouldn't admit fault. They'd hide. Plot. Wait. I'd spent months studying them. I could wait longer. But I also understood now that this wasn't just about them. The messages started pouring in. Strangers. Clients. Other women. People who'd worked with Nathan. People who'd been to therapy with someone like Kelly. I thought I was the only one. Thank you for showing it wasn't just me. It wasn't comfort. It wasn't closure. It was validation. I spent nights reading every message. And on the 7th day after the article dropped, I wrote my own post. Simple. Direct. I stayed silent because I thought it was safer. It wasn't. Silence only protected them, not me. And if anyone reading this has ever felt like their truth was too messy, too complicated, too emotional to be believed, know this, they count on that silence. Break it. No hashtags. No callouts. No tags. Just the truth. It got over 30,000 shares in 2 days. I didn't reply to the comments. I didn't need to. Because for once the story wasn't theirs. It was mine. And the best part? I wasn't even close to done. Rebecca reached out again. She wanted to do a feature on ethical breaches in therapy, a long-form piece. She asked if I'd go on the record. Use my name. My face. I hesitated. I'd lived so long behind legalese, contracts, NDAs. The idea of stepping into the light publicly, openly, made my skin crawl. But then I thought about the screenshots. About that chat. About the jokes they made. And I knew. They already stole my privacy. Now they'd watch me take the stage. I told Rebecca yes. I said yes. To the interview. To the feature. To putting my face and name to the story. It wasn't easy. Rebecca set up the shoot in a neutral office space. No dramatic lighting. No soft focus. Just me, a chair, and the truth. When the cameras rolled, I spoke plainly. Not like a victim. Not like an angry ex. But as an attorney. As a woman. As a human being who had been violated, not just by a man, but by a system that allowed people like Kelly to operate unchecked. I'm not sharing this for sympathy, I said into the lens. I'm sharing it because silence protected them. I thought silence was professionalism. It wasn't. It was permission. The interview went live on a Sunday morning. By noon, it had 100,000 views. By the evening, it hit 500,000. But more than the numbers, it was the emails. The DMs. The flood of people who told me they'd been through the same. Clients. Colleagues. Therapists. Lawyers. Even a few former patients of Kelly's. They didn't need my name. They needed a mirror. And I became that mirror. But the story didn't end there. Because Kelly tried to reappear. 2 weeks after the interview, she launched a new website under a slightly altered name. A Healing Collective. Soft pastels. Vague language about narrative reconstruction and mutual forgiveness. I laughed when I saw it. Of course. Reframe. Rebrand. Reset. But not on my watch. I called Laura. It's time, I said. She knew what I meant. We filed a civil suit. Not for money. For precedent. For public record. For the paper trail that would follow Kelly wherever she tried to hide. The filing itself made waves. It was picked up by industry publications, legal blogs, even a few mainstream outlets. And it sent a message that no rebrand could erase. This wasn't about bitterness. It was about boundaries. The case would take months, years, maybe. But I wasn't rushing. Because I'd learned that real power wasn't loud. It wasn't the viral post or the trending hashtag. It was the quiet knowing. The unshakable clarity. Still, I couldn't pretend everything was resolved. Nathan vanished from social media. Kelly deactivated all her profiles. They retreated into the shadows. But silence wasn't peace. It was pause. And I knew their type. They'd wait. They'd plot. They'd find new ways to twist the story. But this time, I wasn't the woman in the dark. I was the woman at the table. And the table had turned. Late one night, Laura sent me a message. You know this isn't just about them, right? She wrote. You just cracked open something bigger. I knew. I saw it in the headlines, the panels, the webinars popping up everywhere about ethics, about boundaries, about digital professionalism. People were listening now. Because I made them listen. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of being the one who spoke first. I didn't owe them silence. I owed myself the mic. The invitations started pouring in. Conferences, panels, webinars. People wanted me to speak about ethics, about power, about boundaries, about what happens when professionals, people trusted with the most intimate parts of our lives, abuse that trust. At first, I hesitated. I wasn't an influencer. I wasn't a speaker. I was an attorney. But maybe that was exactly why I needed to speak. Because no one warns you what it feels like to be the one left holding the truth. It's not clean. It's not cathartic. It's lonely, messy, heavy. So I said yes. To one panel. Then another. I told my story the way I wish someone had told it to me. Not as a perfect narrative of victimhood and triumph, but as a messy, uncomfortable, unfinished thing. But just when I thought I'd finally taken back the narrative, the next threat arrived. Anonymous emails. Blocked numbers. Cryptic messages. You're not as clean as you think. Maybe you like the power now. Funny how the victim became the bully. I didn't flinch. They were trying to flip the script again. Classic abuser playbook. When you can't silence her, make her look like the aggressor. At first, I tried to ignore them. But the messages got bolder. One morning, I found a printed note slipped under my office door. It read, "Be careful. We all know who you really are." No signature. But I knew. It wasn't over. Nathan, Kelly, or maybe one of their orbiting allies. Someone who needed me to question myself. To wonder if I'd gone too far. If I'd become the monster they painted. But they underestimated me. Because by now I understood the game better than they did. And I wasn't playing defense anymore. That week, I launched something new. A series of public essays. Stories from others who'd been silenced, manipulated, gaslit by people in power. I called the series Unscripted. No filters. No anonymity unless they wanted it. Just voices. Raw. Real. It wasn't about me anymore. It was about breaking the cycle. The first essay dropped on a Thursday. Within 48 hours, it was trending on Medium, picked up by several mainstream outlets. People weren't just reading. They were responding, sharing, adding their own stories. I didn't ask for permission. I didn't wait for the media to frame the conversation. I created the conversation. Because I'd learned something about control. They only have it if you let them have the mic. By Sunday night, I got an email from a woman I'd never met. Her subject line, "They tried the same thing with me." Her story? Almost identical to mine. A therapist. A breach. A private circle turned into a weapon. She'd stayed silent for years. But after reading my essay, she wrote, "I'm ready to speak now." I replied with 3 words. "You have the mic." That night, I slept better than I had in months. Because this was never about revenge. It was about resonance. About making sure no one ever sits in a therapy room, or a boardroom, or a courtroom, feeling like they have no choice but silence. I'd been that woman once. I never would be again. And if someone out there still thought they could corner me with threats and shadows, I hope they were watching closely. Because the woman they tried to erase was just getting started. The ceasefire ended abruptly. 3 months after my essay series launched, the letters arrived. Official. From a high-profile law firm in LA. A lawsuit. Filed jointly by Nathan and Kelly. Alleging defamation. Reputation destruction. Malicious interference with professional standing. Classic. They couldn't control the narrative anymore, so they were going to drown me in paperwork. In court dates. In fees. In stress. I'd seen it before. It's a tactic as old as power itself. Flip the story, weaponize the system, make the victim the aggressor. They weren't subtle about it either. The filing was public. And the media, always hungry for the next twist, devoured it. Suddenly the headlines changed. Former client accused of targeted smear campaign. When advocacy crosses the line? Podcasts debated whether my actions were ethical overreach. Panels whispered about cancel culture in therapy. It was exhausting. Infuriating. Exactly what they wanted. They weren't trying to win the case. They were trying to exhaust me. To isolate me. To make me look like the unstable, vengeful woman they'd always tried to paint. And for a minute, a single, suffocating minute, it worked. I saw colleagues step back. Emails got colder. Invites disappeared. Some people, the ones who clapped the loudest when I went public, were now silent. Waiting to see who would win. I don't blame them. Fear is contagious. But they forgot, I'd been here before. They didn't break me the first time. They wouldn't break me now. I called Laura. Escalation was always coming, she said. But this is uglier than we thought. I'm ready, I said. She paused. Are you really? I didn't answer right away. Because readiness isn't a feeling. It's a decision. I'm done playing defense, I said finally. We counterfile. And we did. Aggressive. Relentless. With facts, not feelings. We filed a counterclaim for emotional distress, for breach of professional ethics, for punitive damages. We filed for anti-slap protections, a law designed to shield people from lawsuits intended purely to silence them. But more importantly, I went public. Again. Not just as Rachel, the woman whose therapist betrayed her, but as Rachel, the lawyer. The advocate. I wrote a new essay. When they can't discredit your story, they try to sue it into silence. It went viral within hours. And this time the tone was different. People saw the pattern. They understood the playbook. The backlash against Nathan and Kelly was louder, sharper. But I knew they wouldn't stop. People like them never stop. They don't want justice. They want submission. And they were about to learn I don't submit. I held town halls. Spoke at legal ethics conferences. Turned my essay series into workshops. I taught others how to recognize these tactics. How to document. How to protect themselves before the threats arrive. I wasn't hiding behind the courtroom anymore. I was on the offensive. And if they thought they could drain me with their lawsuits, they underestimated how many people were behind me now. Because this was bigger than me. And it always had been. The day their lawyers tried to push a settlement, a weak, smug attempt to save face, I rejected it. Not because I wanted more money, but because I wanted the record. The precedent. The message. Some battles aren't about winning. They're about dismantling the weapons themselves. That's what this had become. And when I finally walked into that courtroom, I didn't walk in as the woman they tried to erase. I walked in as the woman they created. And I knew no matter how long the fight stretched, I'd already taken from them the one thing they feared most. Control. Courtrooms are colder than you expect. Not in temperature, but in atmosphere. They want you to feel small. Insignificant. Like your story doesn't belong here. Like it's too messy, too emotional, too personal for these sterile walls. But I didn't feel small when I walked into that courtroom. I felt taller than I ever had. Because they tried everything. The jokes. The manipulation. The gaslighting. The threats. The lawsuits. And still I was standing. They tried to rewrite my story. But I was the one holding the pen now. The trial became a media event. Journalists filled the back rows. Legal analysts speculated on live streams. Nathan and Kelly's lawyers tried to spin it as a misunderstanding, as blurred boundaries, as therapeutic missteps. But I made sure the facts spoke louder than their spin. The emails. The chat logs. The podcast transcripts. The anonymous testimonies from other clients who, inspired by my essays, came forward at the last minute to share their stories. Kelly's mask cracked during cross-examination. Under oath, she tried to minimize her actions. But the evidence was airtight. And Nathan? He didn't even show up for the second week of trial. Cowards never do. The judge didn't need long. The ruling was clear. Kelly had violated professional ethics. Nathan and Kelly's defamation lawsuit was dismissed as baseless and retaliatory. The court awarded me damages. But the money didn't matter. What mattered was the line in the official record. The acknowledgement. The precedent. They couldn't erase that. No settlement. No PR spin. No podcast episode. After the verdict, I stepped outside the courthouse. Reporters swarmed me. I didn't give them a soundbite. I gave them the truth. This was never about revenge, I said calmly. This was about protecting the line between professional power and personal exploitation. That line matters. And if we don't defend it, we lose more than trust. We lose safety. We lose ourselves. The next day, the headlines weren't about Nathan and Kelly. They were about the system that enabled them. The conversations changed. Therapy boards held emergency reviews. Law firms launched ethics seminars. Corporate HR departments revised their harassment policies. Because this wasn't just a story anymore. It was a movement. And I wasn't leading it alone. I had an army now. An invisible army of people who'd been told they were too loud, too dramatic, too complicated. We were done playing nice. We were playing smart. And loud. And relentless. But even in the glow of victory, I knew something most people wouldn't understand. The real battle wasn't in the courtroom. It was in the silences. The nights I stared at my ceiling, wondering if I was becoming the monster they painted. The mornings I woke up to see another anonymous message trying to pull me back into fear. Those were the battles. And I won them. Every single day. This wasn't about Nathan and Kelly anymore. They were footnotes now. The real enemy? The system that taught them they could get away with it. That's the system I was dismantling. And I wasn't close to done. The day after the verdict, I walked back into my office. Not with fear, but with purpose. I had new cases to fight. New clients to protect. New stories to amplify. And if someone out there thought they could scare me back into silence, they weren't paying attention. The woman they tried to erase wasn't just back. She'd rebuilt herself into something they couldn't predict. A force. A voice. And this time, I wasn't handing the mic to anyone else. Winning doesn't feel like you think it will. There's no confetti. No fireworks. No swelling music. It feels quiet. Heavy. Like breathing air you didn't know you were holding for too long. After the trial, I slipped back into work. New cases. New clients. New stories. People treated me differently now. Not with sympathy. With respect. They knew I wouldn't flinch. That I wouldn't look away. But even in victory, there was an ache I couldn't name. A part of me still tangled in the what-ifs. What if I hadn't fought? What if they'd succeeded? What if this was just the beginning? I kept pushing the questions down. Until the invitation came. A keynote slot at the National Ethics and Practice Summit. I almost deleted the email. But something in me paused. Maybe it was time. Not to tell the story again. But to tell what came after. I said yes. The night before the speech, I sat alone in my hotel room, staring at my notes. They felt hollow. Dry. Safe. And I realized I didn't want safe. I wanted honest. The next day, I stood on the stage in front of 800 professionals. And I told them the truth. I came here to talk about boundaries, I began. But what I really want to talk about is aftermath. I told them what no one tells you after you win. That healing isn't clean. That justice doesn't erase the damage. That the hardest fight isn't in the courtroom. It's in the mirror. When you have to face the version of yourself they tried to build. I didn't tell them to be brave. I told them to be relentless. To be strategic. To be loud. And to never ever hand their story to anyone else. The applause was long. Not the polite kind. The kind that vibrates in your bones. After the talk, people lined up to speak to me. To thank me. To tell me their stories. And as I was packing up to leave, an envelope was slid under my conference folder. No name. Just a printed message. Your story is the first crack. But the foundation goes deeper. Much deeper. A link. A file. Encrypted. No sender. No instructions. But I recognized the pattern. And the implication. Nathan and Kelly? They were small players. Foot soldiers. The real architects of these systems? Still in the shadows. Waiting. Building. Smiling in polished profiles while they pulled the strings no one dared to see. I stared at the message. And for the first time in weeks I smiled. Because I wasn't afraid of the next layer. I was ready. And this time? I wouldn't wait for them to come for me. I'd come for them. The day after the conference I didn't go back to my office. I went to war. Not the kind with courtrooms and legal filings. The kind that starts in quiet rooms and encrypted files and whispers most people don't hear until it's too late. The file from the anonymous message was clean. Professional. A map of sorts. Names. Connections. Organizations. Patterns of influence. It was bigger than I imagined. And it didn't start with Nathan or Kelly. They were pawns. The real game players? They were the polished executives. The respected mentors. The trusted gatekeepers. I spent nights cross-referencing names, timelines, digital footprints. I found patterns I couldn't unsee. Whispers of NDAs silencing survivors. Closed-door conferences where careers were traded like favors. Therapy collectives that operated more like loyalty clubs than safe spaces. It wasn't just therapy. It was the entire ecosystem of power that protects predators in suits, in labs, in boardrooms. And for the first time I understood the scale of the war I'd stumbled into. But this time I wouldn't stumble. I would strike. I assembled a team. Whistleblowers. Ethics lawyers. Investigative journalists. I built something new. A platform. Off record. A place for stories. Proof. Patterns. Not hidden behind paywalls or courtroom red tape. Visible. Documented. Connected. Because patterns only stay hidden when we isolate our stories. When we see them together, they're undeniable. The platform launched quietly, but the ripples were immediate. Submissions poured in. Anonymous at first, then louder, bolder. People wanted to speak now, and I made sure they had the tools to do it safely, strategically. I didn't need the media to chase the story anymore. I was the story, and the ones still hiding behind their power, they knew it. I could feel it. In the silence, in the closed doors, in the way their PR machines tried to pivot the conversation, to gaslight the public into thinking the problem was overblown. They were scared. They should be. Because we weren't just telling stories. We were documenting systems. We were building blueprints. And the next time they tried to discredit a woman like me, she wouldn't be standing alone. She'd be standing on a foundation they couldn't crumble. One night, weeks into the project, I got a new email. Encrypted. A name. A face. An address. An organization. The same one that hosted the leadership retreats Nathan bragged about. The same one Kelly referenced in her old podcast as the circle that opens every door. The email was simple. Start here. No signature. No threats. No demands. But I knew what it meant. It was an invitation. To go deeper. To follow the trail into the places most people are too scared to look. Places where careers are made and broken in silence. I closed the laptop. Sat back. Let the weight of it settle. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning. And this time, I wouldn't wait for them to knock on my door. I was already on theirs.